Okay, everyone, good morning. It warms my heart so much to see so many members of the Mississippi Historical Society here from around the state. Some of my friends who I know and some friends still to be known. And then also those who are local. So it's so exciting to have these different worlds coming together. I am so excited. Thank you for coming to session 4 of the Mississippi Historical Society meeting, Commemorating and Preserving Local African American History. My name is Dr. Rebecca Turry. I'm an associate professor at the University of Southern Mississippi, and I'm also the co-director for the Center for the Study of the Gulf South. And in putting together this panel, I and some other organizers of the Mississippi Historical Society wanted to ensure that we were able to show the vibrancy of the amazing local historical work being done to commemorate Black history here in Hattiesburg. And we really wanted to showcase that for the Mississippi Historical Society. And so I'm going to first introduce all of our wonderful panelists who you'll be hearing from today, and I'm going to introduce them in the order that they will be presenting. I will also do all the presentations, or the introductions now, and so as to not kind of interrupt the different presentations. Okay, so first we will hear from Ms. LaToya Norman, who is the Director of Museums for the Hattiesburg Convention Commission. Her work with the commission began in 2008 when she was hired as their education coordinator. This position gave her the opportunity to educate children of all ages about the selfless service and sacrifice of African Americans in the military and the meaningful role community members have played during times of war. Today, she oversees developments in the 6th Street Museum District, which include the African American Military History Museum, the Osceola McCarty House, historic Eureka School, which we are in right now, and the Smith Drugstore Company. Her favorite aspect of her work is getting to know local veterans and being able to share their stories with visitors. Her work, alongside dedicated staff, has led to national exposure of the African American Military History Museum. She resides in Hattiesburg and enjoys spending time with her husband, Alfonso, and their 2 children, Elisa and Jameer. Next, we will hear from Stella Mcabee. She is a lifelong resident of Hattiesburg. She graduated from Rowan High School and has attended classes at Jackson State University, the University of Southern Mississippi, and Pearl River Community College. She's retired from South Central Bell, where she served as a long-distance and directory assistance operator with 28 years of service. She's also a wife, a mother, and a grandmother. She has served her community in a variety of roles, including as a member of the Eureka organization, as secretary and member of the Education Committee, signer of the Articles to Incorporate. She's also served on the Forest County branch of the NAACP as secretary and the Mississippi State Conference of the NAACP as assistant secretary. She has served as vice president of the Mobile Bowie Neighborhood Association and secretary for the North Main Street Neighborhood Association. She served on a committee to organize the 100th year celebration, again, of this wonderful school, of the Eureka School, in 2021. Next, we will hear from Councilwoman Deborah Delgado. Delgado is in her 6th term on the Hattiesburg City Council, representing Ward 2, the area that comprises the eastern and northeastern parts of the city and borders of the Leaf River and Bowie River. It is the site of the Urban Renewal Overlay District, known as Twin Forks Rising, which was initiated by Councilman Delgado. Delgado is founder and chairperson of the annual Historic Mobile Street Renaissance Festival, an annual celebration of the culture and heritage which she launched in 2008. She is a member of the Advisory Council of the National League of Cities, having previously served on the board of directors, a past president of the National Black Caucus of Local Elected Officials, and current board member, a past president and current board member of the NBC-LEO, the National Black Caucus of Local Elected Officials Foundation, a past president of the Mississippi Black Caucus of Local Elected Officials, and current Vice President for Trade for the World Conference of Mayors. She has been a board member and executive committee member of the Mississippi Municipal League. Councilwoman Delgado, a 1970 graduate of L.J. Rowan High School, holds a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Political Science and a Master's of Arts degree in History from Jackson State University, and a Juris Doctorate from Texas Southern University. Deborah has taught at both Jackson State University and Texas Southern University. She is a member of Tabernacle of Prayer Church of God in Christ, Delta Sigma Theta sorority, life member of the NAACP, and numerous other social and civic organizations. She is married to John Delgado and is mother of 2 sons, Britton, who is married to Tangelina Lofton, and Zachary, who is married to Tanika Denard, and the grandmother of Dean Britton Lofton, L. Britton Lofton, and Amika Joy Denard. Finally, we will hear from Glenda Funches. She is a native of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and graduated in the first fully integrated class in the Hattiesburg Public School District approximately 50 years ago in June of 1972. She attended Freedom School at Mount Zion Baptist Church during the 1964 Freedom Summer Project at the age of 10, and she has often referred to that summer as a turning point in her life, since she decided that summer that she wanted to be a civil rights attorney. She is thankful and grateful for having witnessed firsthand and participated in so many pivotal moments in civil rights history in Hattiesburg, including waiting over 5 hours on March 19, 1968, at Mount Zion Baptist Church here in Hattiesburg to hear Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King as he spoke about the Poor People's Campaign that he was planning for the summer of 1968. She attended undergraduate school at Texas Southern University, where she worked in the history department for 4 years as a work-study student. She vividly recalled being one of the first 18-year-olds to vote in a presidential general election in the United States in November of 1972, after the voting age was lowered from 21 to 18, and that her vote helped elect attorney Barbara Jordan as the first African-American female from a southern state to the United States Congress. Glenda, after obtaining her bachelor's degree from Texas Southern University in Political Science and History in May of 1976, earned her master's degree in Criminal Justice in May of 1978 from USM, and her Doctor of Jurisprudence degree from the University of Tennessee College of Law in August 1984. Funches illustrated her passion for history by enrolling in a pilot history class, the Legal History of America, while in law school. She has been a member of the Mississippi Bar since 1987 and currently the regional managing attorney for the Hattiesburg office of Mississippi Center for Legal Services Corporation. She has spent the last 30 years honoring over 100 local veterans of the civil rights movement, and she certainly has considered it a blessing and an honor to tell the stories of these brave and courageous freedom fighters here in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Won't you please help me in welcoming our panelists today?
Thank you, Rebecca, for those introductions. It's an honor to sit with such an esteemed group of panelists. Good morning to you all. Good morning. And a special thanks again to Rebecca Torrey and Brother Rogers for having the last day of the conference here at the historic Eureka School. It's definitely an honor and privilege to have you all here with us. I'm excited to tell you a little bit about the 6th Street Museum District and the important role our facilities have in Hattiesburg's history. The 6th Street Museum District is comprised of the African American Military History Museum, the historic Eureka School, Smith Drug Company, and the Osceola McCarty House. Today my presentation will focus on the African American Military History Museum at the historic USO Club. And I'd like to note that it is the only facility that has regular hours right now. And I'd also like to know that Smith Drug Company, we celebrated our ribbon cutting last Thursday, and it was very well received. and I hope that you all will have a chance to take a look inside today. It's a week old, and we're really proud of what it looks like and the work that the commission did to get it to where it is. Historic USO Club, because that really truly emphasizes why we are in existence and why this building is so unique and is such a gem to the community. The East 6th Street USO Club opened its doors on March 22nd, 1942 to African American soldiers who were stationed at Camp Shelby. The armed forces were segregated during that time. During World War II, President Franklin D. Roosevelt wanted soldiers to have a nice, wholesome, home-like environment to spend their time at when not training. The federal government would build and lease new buildings for that purpose, and citizens and charitable organizations would fund these service centers through the newly formed United Service Organization. Initially, there were 4 types of USOs built. There was a Type A, Type B, Type C, and Type D. Our USO was a Type D, which was the smallest and the most commonly built for African American soldiers. I've spent a great deal of time trying to learn what our USO meant to soldiers, and found that though it was built with soldiers in mind, it was also a community resource. The East 6th Street USO Club offered a number of services: writing rooms, darkroom equipment, counseling services, typewriting lessons, and the list goes on. The location of the USO was on 6th Street, which was near Hattiesburg's bustling black commercial district, Mobile Street, which is the street that you probably came on to get here. Anything soldiers needed beyond what was offered at the USO could be found on Mobile Street. And I'd like to note that the photographs that you see on the walls, those are Herbert Randall images that showcase Mobile Street, and they're actually printed on material that was recovered from a 2013 tornado. A lot of those businesses were demolished, and we felt it was important to recover some of that material. As you can see here, the USO was a happening place. During that 4th year anniversary, you see that attendance had totaled 993,403 people coming inside that space. 344 volunteers worked 40,261 hours, so the community really embraced the fact that this USO was in the community. The building was decommissioned as a USO club in 1946. It then became a community center, which housed a library for the black community. The space was also used as a school site for Eureka students and later the Head Start program. With the opening of the C. Roy Community Center, which was directly behind on 5th Street, it stopped being a community center, and that's when it started being a space for school. Eventually, the new Head Start Center held classes elsewhere, and the building sat empty. The structure was in need of major repairs. Citizens were concerned the vacant building would be torn down. However, due to the historical significance, and like I said, it being a USO club, and it being a former USO, a group of veterans and a lady by the name of Viola Williams led a campaign to save this historic treasure. A partnership was formed between this group, now known as the African American Military History Museum Committee, and the Hattiesburg Convention Commission. And of note, 2 of the committee members were also commissioners, and that was Mr. Charles J. Brown and the late Miss Viola Williams. And we also have a Mississippi Historical Council member, Dr. Aubrey Lucas, who is a member of the Hattiesburg Convention Commission. So we thank him for his work and for being here. The Military Museum, the African American Military Museum, we celebrated our grand opening in May 2009. The African American Military History Museum chronicles African Americans in the military. So not only do we get to preserve this historic treasure, we get to preserve and share the stories of veterans whose service was not always celebrated. I will tell you about a couple of people. One is Mr. Needham Jones. He's a native of Heidelberg, Mississippi. He was drafted into the Army in 1941. He was sent to Maxwell Air Force Base in Tuskegee for training. Because of a medical condition, he did not get to pursue pilot training. Jones served during World War II as a member of the Tuskegee Airmen in the 99th Pursuit Squadron, assisting with providing ground and technical support for the airmen. He was honorably discharged on July 14, 1945, and returned to Alcorn in the fall of 1945. Mr. Jones has since passed away, but when he was living, he would come to the USO over and over and over again. He didn't come to this particular USO, but he talked about how important USOs were, especially to African American servicemen, not knowing a safe place that they could go to. They knew that they would be embraced and welcome at the USO Club. I used to be asked often, what's the hardest part of your job? And I couldn't really answer that. And there was a year where a lot of our World War II veterans who were coming frequently eventually passed away. Most of them have passed away. And that's the hardest part of the job, is building these relationships and then having to say bye. Meet Ms. Vermel Tart Jackson. Ms. Vermel Tart Jackson served as a junior hostess at our USO during World War II. The role of a junior hostess was to help uplift the morale of troops when visiting the USO. Ms. Tart Jackson stated that she would help soldiers write letters to their loved ones, play games, and sometimes give advice to soldiers. She also worked at Camp Shelby in 1942, and she just recently passed away earlier this year. But what Ms. Vermel did, she allowed us to look at some of the volunteers and their work. Junior hostesses, as you can see, there were several ladies from the community who would come and help entertain the soldiers. Again, this was a wholesome place. There was no alcohol allowed. This was a place where soldiers could come and stay out of trouble. And of course, they were allowed to go on Mobile Street, but women and volunteers were very critical to helping in this national war effort. And because of her, we really got a really good glimpse of what they meant to the soldiers and what they would do. Meet our committee. The African American Military History Museum Committee serves as an advisory board to the staff at the African American Military History Museum. We couldn't do the work that we do there without their guidance. We have a few committee members here I saw come in. If you'll just wave your hand and be recognized. Some of our committee members, 2 of them. We do offer a wide range of programming throughout the year. Our USO has received national recognition. Some of the programs that we offer, we have an annual back-to-school boot camp. It's actually called the Needham Jones Back-to-School Boot Camp. When he was living, he would come to the boot camp and he would offer advice to some of the students. And so we thought it would be very fitting to name our boot camp after him. And so we have a few participants every year. That's a picture from the earlier days. But that's one of our favorite outreach programs for our youth. We have Christmas open house, preservation workshops, just a wide range of activities that we would like to offer for our community. As mentioned earlier, we have had some national recognition. We've been featured in PBS's USO for the Troops. CBS News Sunday Morning came to Hattiesburg. They actually interviewed the family of Ensign Jesse Leroy Brown, the first African-American naval aviator. We've been featured on C-SPAN. Future plans, we always love collaborating with our community. As Ms. Stella mentioned in her bio, we just celebrated the centennial of this school, and so that was a really great celebration. But for the African American Military History Museum specifically, we have a gentleman who's donated some military vehicles, and so we're building a space to house those, and that will be right across from the African American Military History Museum. So, thank you.
Greetings. And I suppose at this time I'm supposed to say thank you for the privilege. However, at this very moment, I'm not sure that it is a privilege. My task this morning is to speak to you a few minutes about the role of UROHA, or Euro, in the preservation of our history. To appreciate the role of UROHA, or Euro, as it was formerly known, in the preservation and renovation of this historic building, it may be good to understand and know how and why the organization developed. Euro, as originally named, includes the combined first letters of Eureka and Royal Street Rowan schools. Eureka has historic value in Hattiesburg in that it was the first high school in Hattiesburg to be started for children of color. and in Mississippi, in that it was only the second brick school for those of us of color. Now, according to Raylani Branch, who must have been told because she was not around at the time, members of our community thought so much of a school coming here that we helped. People came out after long and hard days of labor to pick up trash, to lay bricks, to tote water, or to do whatever meaningful labor they could. People who had extraordinarily little in the way of time or money. Eureka opened in 1921. Eureka not only served the students of Hattiesburg, but Eureka was a union school, which meant it served the schools of Forest and other surrounding counties. It may be interesting to note here that Hattiesburg School District started in 1892 for white children. When the community outgrew Eureka as the only school for us, plans proceeded to establish a new high school on the opposite side of town with the proposed bond issue of $125,000. That same eagerness followed. So then 20 years later, in 1941, Royal Street High School opened. The name changed to Rowan in the mid-1950s. Rowan became an accredited high school by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools in December of 1962. Now, just as with all schools established everywhere, anywhere, there were many students that after leaving or graduating moved to other areas. Several went on to have well-lived lives away from Hattiesburg. But along with the many of us that stayed home, began to feel the need for coming back home to reunite, to fellowship, and to rekindle our love for these two schools. We had our first reunion in 1978. It was grand, much more than was expected, but that was hoped for. It was then decided to come together every 3 years. The then triennial grand reunion became significant in immeasurable ways, from the renewing of acquaintances and friendships to the recalling of unique events of the past. It brought together a talented group of people from all economic and social groups, a people bound together by common heritage. Now, I attended both Eureka and Rowan. I became a part of the organization now known as Eureka. This building has different and countless meanings to each of us. Eureka is truly one of the things in Hattiesburg that remains valued to us. This building reminds us of where we started and provides us with a sense of community and stability. The school's transformation into a museum began in 2006 when it was acquired by the Hattiesburg Convention Commission. The Euroha Alumni Association funded the first adopted reuse plan for the building in the late 1990s. In addition, Euro sponsored the placement of a state historical marker on the campus. Now, while the Euro organization was not able to facilitate the construction and financing the preserving of our school, even with suspicion from some and hesitation from others, we boldly accepted the assistance of those that could. Other partners included the Hattiesburg Convention and Tourism Commission, the Historic Hattiesburg Downtown Association, the City of Hattiesburg, the Mobile Bowie Street Neighborhood Association, the Hattiesburg Public School District, and the University of Southern Mississippi. Now, during the late 1920s, it was calculated that the average amount of funds spent on white students was around $35, while the average for black students was around $18. Despite the inequities, our schools thrived, or maybe I should say, we survived. I think it inconsistent that the same institutions, and of course by different names now, that put forth a school bond issue to finance the school for us, grades 1 through 12, with merely $75,000, or now the same institutions that are so prominent with the financing of millions, maybe even billions of dollars to preserve what was then considered a tolerance. Quoting from Rick Taylor, who was then director of the Hattiesburg Convention Commission, by renovating Eureka, the Hattiesburg Convention Commission believes it will allow the Pine Belt to see and walk through history. We need to set that stage, and we will tell that story of where they lived in the Pine Belt area. And this is the quote from Up Behind the Walls of Eureka School from WDAM. He also documented, it is the brainchild of the Eureka Alumni Association, and we truly thank him for that. Eureka proudly proclaims the tendering of the first $10,000 for the project from local funds came $125,000. A grant in the amount of $280,000 was secured by the Hattiesburg Tourism and Convention Commission. But just as Raylani said at the beginning, we are so glad to have it. We are willing to help where we can. We generated the first $10,000 with the same passion as we accepted that $75,000 school bond issue in 1921. And we so graciously accepted the matching funds of the City of Hattiesburg, the Convention and Tourism Commission, and grants of federal funding for the preservation and restoration of our beloved Eureka School.
Well, good morning. Good morning. How's everybody doing? I am delighted to see you this morning. So delighted to be with you as we discuss as we share the history of our community and activities that we have engaged in for the purpose of preserving that history. I want to say before he leaves that one of the driving forces in the establishment of the historic Mobile Street Renaissance Festival is a gentleman named Charles Harrington. Now, he always shies away from me mentioning that because he's here working today. He's with WDAM. But he wrote and produced a documentary called Barrel House Boogie and Bottlenecks, the Hattiesburg Blues Connection. And it is a documentary that I was able to attend at the Hattiesburg Public Library, and they're represented here today, one of my favorite places in town. One evening after I had first moved back home, and that had to be in the early to mid 90s, and I just kind of happened up on it, but it talked about all of the historic blues figures that had really lived and worked in and around the Mobile Street area. And of course, Mobile Street was the black business and entertainment district in a segregated Hattiesburg, Mississippi. So historically, this was an entertainment district as well as a business district because of the limitations that segregation placed on black people in Hattiesburg. When I viewed the documentary, there were a lot of questions about many of the figures that he highlighted, and one of them he mentioned that he could not get a lot of information on, and he wanted to know if anybody in the audience knew a Monroe Chapman. And he said that there was very little information that he could find about him. And I was thinking to myself, my uncle's name was Monroe Chapman, and reluctantly raised my hand. But I was saying to myself, he was no blues singer. You know, he was a TV repairman. And he had his living room set up so that I would go there and he would have all these different TVs on at the same time and would entertain me by, you know, having all the different televisions on. But I just said, you know, I told him that, but that I would ask family members. So when I went home that evening, I started calling my cousins, his children, to say, did Uncle Jack do anything in the blues industry? They would say, yeah, Daddy had a record out. You know, just a number of things that Mama and Daddy sang. So, you know, I learned a little bit about my own family history, you know, from attending this event. At the same time, in the community, there was conversation about festivals that were taking place in Hattiesburg. I think there was a fall festival here, and that would have been a precursor of the Hub Fest. And the black community was saying, well, when are they going to do a festival in our community? And my question in my mind was, you know, why aren't we doing a festival that celebrates us, you know, ourselves? And when taking the information that I had received from Charles Harrington's work and talking to my own family, and then eventually getting elected to the city council and engaging with the Mobile Bowie Neighborhood Association, we started to churn the wheels on how we could put on our own festival that celebrated the heritage and culture of this community. We started to do the research first because I didn't know anything about putting on a festival, and the members of the Neighborhood Association did not either. And I do believe that Ms. Mcabee went to festival training workshops with me because we were trying to find out how is it that you do this thing to make sure that it's a success. So we did go to some workshops, and we learned that the festival needed to really be family-based. You know, it needed to be well marketed. We needed to have a whole army of volunteers. We needed to do fundraising. All of the things that meant that we had a whole lot of work to do. But believe it or not, in 2005, before Hurricane Katrina hit, we were able to put on our first, and I'll call it ragtag now because it was nothing like what it has grown to be this day. But that was 17 years ago. And that festival was the result of the hard work of the Mobile Bowie Neighborhood Association and those who had lived in the community who were excited about any activity that was going to celebrate the heritage and culture of Mobile Street. It was labeled a blues and gospel festival, and in that way we attracted people who were blues enthusiasts and certainly gospel choirs and people who love gospel music. We started the festival by making sure that we had a good lineup of acts so that people would come out, and I was just really shocked at the turnout for that first festival. Really surprised that we had that number of people who came out to an event that was put on by a group that really had not done it before. There was marketing of the festival, but not to the extent that we do it now. But people came out nevertheless. And in conversations with those who attended the festival, we learned what people would like to see in that festival. We learned a whole lot more about the businesses and activities that had taken place historically on Mobile Street. One of the things that we learned in researching the festival, and in order to make the festival a success, we needed to know more about the history of Mobile Street. We learned that Mobile Street had been Mobile Street from the beginning of it, and that would be down near the river, to the bread company, which is at Bushman Street. But prior to World War II, or during World War II, the name of the street had been changed at 2nd to become Market Street. And we were told by talking to elders in the area that that name was changed because when Hattiesburg was segregated, and when the soldiers came to town, they were from all over the place. And they knew that Mobile Street was an area, a place where you could go for entertainment. But you had black and white soldiers coming down to Mobile Street. And people in Hattiesburg who, you know, the natives of Hattiesburg were not quite comfortable with that. So there was a change in the name of the street at Market, at Second, so that it would be Market down to Bushman. So that when the soldiers came in, you could give them directions as to where they could go. They sent black soldiers down to the Mobile Street area and white soldiers to Market Street. But I'm told that white soldiers also came down to Mobile Street because it was the entertainment district. And during the war, it was a place for them to have, you know, some relief from what was going on down there. And certainly those who could not get lemonade and tea at the USO got whatever else that they would like to have from right here on Mobile Street. The historic Mobile Street Renaissance Festival was established to really bring people back into the community. When I moved back to Hattiesburg, not much was going on down here, and the talk around town was that, you know, Mobile Street was a dangerous place to be and nobody wanted to be down there anymore. There were a lot of older buildings and the like. But I knew that in other areas and other communities, people celebrated the history of a street like Mobile Street because it had been the thing that it had been the place where they were able to sustain themselves, where businesses were able to locate without having problems, that there were no backdoor doctor offices, for example. There was no second-class citizen treatment in the stores that were located on Mobile Street. And for entertainment, it was a place where people could go without being hassled for the most part. So we had to come up with a way to celebrate that history and to teach the history to generations that were living in Hattiesburg at that time that had no idea of what the realities of our existence had been. In order for us to do it, we had to establish relationships with other entities that could help us to teach that history. And one of the better relationships that I have experienced during this Mobile Street Festival production year after year has been a relationship with the Center for Black Studies at the University of Southern Mississippi. Dr. Curtis Austin was the first person to approach me about that. He was a professor of history at USM, and he was the director of the Center for Black Studies at that time. And he brought information, activity, and students down here that could help us impart that history. He also wanted to help us collect that history. At many of our early festivals, we would have storytelling tents where we would capture the stories of elders, particularly in the community, about their experiences on Mobile Street. He also assisted us in establishing an office for the Center for Black Studies it would have been at 522 Mobile Street. That building was at the corner of the street where we are now, and this is 6th Street and Mobile Street, but it was damaged by the storm of 2013. That building was constructed by a Masonic group back in the 50s, and it was not occupied at the time that we started the festival. It was not being used, I put it like that. And we approached that Masonic group to see if we could not only put a Center for Black Studies in there, but also put an office for the Mobile Street Festival in there as well. We were able to raise about $40,000 to renovate the building so that we would be able to locate there. And we did that, and it was a place that had technology there. There were computers in there for children who did not have access to computers and the like in their home. There was internet access there, and children in the community could come in and get assistance with homework. They could check out books. They could come to different classes that we had. We had our Mobile Street Festival office there where we conducted the business of the festival there as well. That building was special to me because my father's photography business had been located in there when I was very young. We tried to bring a bit of the history of his business there by putting the picture window or the display window the way that he had displayed it when he was in business there. And people would come from the area to bring photographs that had been displayed in that window, you know, for us to display them. And I know Mr. Charles Brown was telling me that that window was the way that, you know, he and his peers were able to find out who was going with who. Because people would go there as couples to take, you know, photographs and put them in that window. But that was you know, a good experience that we had. Unfortunately, we lost the building in the 2013 storm. Some of the features of the festival include a children's village. That was one of the most important things that we learned that would attract support for the festival and interest in the festival as well as attendance. Because if you provide activities for children, you're going to bring families out because parents want to come out and have really good activities, good wholesome activities for their children. We have partnered with Hattiesburg Public Schools. Their arts programs participate in the festival every year. We have music presentations by students at the school. We also have dance and cheerleading activities going on during the festival that are brought to us by Hattiesburg Public Schools. In addition to that, the Hattiesburg Arts Council comes out and works with our children as well. We often have volunteers from the University of Southern Mississippi to engage in sports activities with our children in that children's village. It goes on all day, so there are a number of different kinds of activities that take place during that event. We provide a place for vendors, and we have all types of vendors. Not only do they sell arts and crafts, but different kinds of food. One of the activities that we sponsor during the historic Mobile Street Renaissance Festival is the Show Enough Good Barbecue Cook-Off. Now that has been a hit because it enables local barbecue enthusiasts, or people who fashion themselves to be the best barbecue chef, you know, in the country or in the world for that matter, to come out and compete. And it is the kind of competition that brings the community out, because we give prizes that would encourage people to come out. From the beginning, our first prize has always been $1,000, second prize $500, and third prize $250. And we have it in both chicken and pork categories. And you have people coming out to participate, and it's your average Joe. I can remember one time a gentleman who worked for the city came out, and he, you know, most of the guys come out with these big rigs, you know, big barbecue rigs, who, you know, they're accustomed to participating. But we had one year who had a little Walmart grill. It was not much bigger than that, and it was on a table. And this guy walked away with $250. and some of the folks who had the big rigs did not do as well as he did. But at any rate, it's a great activity. We partner with Marjack. It used to be Marshall Durbin at that time, to sponsor that activity, and it is really a great opportunity for community engagement. In addition to that, we have a pound cake competition, a sweet potato pie competition, and a vegan burger battle. Oh my goodness. All right. I am really working on this. Each year that we put on the festival, we have been dedicated to trying to lead an improvement on Mobile Street on the ground. We call it an improvement on the ground. And one of the most significant activities that we were able to bring, and one of the most significant improvements that we were able to bring, was to place a bench by the road. A bench by the road is a project sponsored by the Toni Morrison Society. And in the book, Beloved, she talked about how it was that there was no place to celebrate slavery, no place to celebrate the lives of slaves. There's no monument, no statue, not even a bench by the road. So the society started a bench by the road project where they placed these benches all over the world. I think now they have about 34 placed around the world. One is even at the Sorbonne in Paris, just so many places. But we got the third bench by the road. And if you go online and check the Toni Morrison Society, you will see that Hattiesburg has the third bench by the road, and it honors Freedom Summer, that one, that bench by the road does. And as you leave here today, you may want to drive by and go and take a seat on our bench and read the writings that accompany it, because those benches are going to be on the National Register of Historic Sites, and Hattiesburg will have one of those. Just bringing about cleaning up of the community, an effort to really revitalize it. The Smith Drugstore that Ms. Norman mentioned to you, having been refurbished, revitalized, and opened as a historic site is an additional opportunity that we have had to highlight Mobile Street, highlight the history of Mobile Street. In 2008, a historic marker was placed on Mobile Street during the festival that honors the blues heritage of this street. We are looking forward to continuing to come up with ways to build up Mobile Street, the history of Mobile Street, to share it and to make it a destination place for people who want to learn about what has happened in a city like Hattiesburg as we continue to try to bring about equity in our community.
Previously served as a Chancery Court judge, but he took on their case and he had to fight almost the entire bar, local bar. They even went to him and said, if you give them their money back, we will pay you. And he told them, no, if I take your money, then I won't be respected by the whites nor the blacks in this community. He took the case and it was dismissed in the lower court, in the U.S. District Court, but when he appealed the case to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal in New Orleans, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal said that the circuit clerk, Luther Cox, could not require them to read and interpret, because the way the statute was written in 1890, if you were literate, you could read, and if you were illiterate, then you could interpret. And so that was a victory there for them. He even took the case a step further to the U.S. Supreme Court, but they refused to grant certiorari. But in October of 2020, I dedicated a marker, which is located here on Mobile Street, to honor those 15 men, but standing up and filing this lawsuit for the right to vote. I also honored the Southern White attorney, and there is a plaque hanging by his photo in the Chancery Court building here in Forest County. So Hattiesburg has one of the most interesting civil rights history. It was a major battleground for voting rights. And if you just talk about Hattiesburg civil rights movement from the point of Freedom Summer, you are disregarding all the foundation that was laid by the local people. How many of you here have heard of Reverend W.D. Ridgway? Okay. And how many of you here have heard of the 1957 Civil Rights Act? Now we know that that act was passed in September of 1957. You had one of the longest filibuster done. I think it went over 24 hours. Strom Thurmond. He even took a hot shower so that he did not have to go to the bathroom. But nevertheless, President Eisenhower signed the Civil Rights Act in September of 1957. Within that act, it created the Civil Rights Division. Medgar Evers, who was the field secretary for Mississippi, could find no one to go to Washington to testify. But Reverend Ridgway, who was a right-hand man to Medgar Evers, volunteered to go. And he went up and testified in February of 1957. February 28, he testified about voting inequities here in Forest County, how African Americans were systematically denied the right to vote by Circuit Clerk Luther Cox. And they were often asked how many bubbles are in a bar of soap. So it's testimonies like Reverend Ridgway and others that led to the passage of the 1957 Civil Rights Act that created the Civil Rights Division, which was mandated to investigate these improprieties that were going on in the southern state. And one of the first order of business, they requested the record of the 15 African American men in the case of P versus Luther Cox, and that gave them some leeway and to who to go to when they filed the lawsuit against Thurman and Lynn. Another thing about the case of P versus Luther Cox, even though the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal had said they could not require them to read and interpret, there were only one of the petitioners that was allowed to vote, and that was Dr. E. Hammond Smith, who Drugstore they just restored. And he just went in one day, him and another businessman, Mr. Milton Barnes, who owned the Hi-Hat Club and Barnes Cleaner, and they went looking for Luther Cox, and Hammond Smith, Dr. Hammond Smith found him first, and he asked him, what did he want? And he said, I want to register to vote. And this was in 1954. And he just signed up. And when Mr. Milton Barnes Sr. went in to try to vote within minutes, he told him to get out of his office. Because what had happened, 15 African American men, there were about 5 who signed their full name. And one of them was Mr. Milton Barnes Sr. But Dr. E. Hammond Smith signed his name, E. H. Smith. And so he did not know that that was actually Dr. Evelyn Hammond Smith. And so from 1955 to 1960, there were only 12 African Americans in this county that was allowed to vote. Only 12. And so when the U.S. Justice Department moved that operation into Hattiesburg, they began to look at the fact for a 5-year period, not one African American was allowed to vote, registered to vote in this county. In 1962, September of 1962, CBS aired a special report on Mississippi and the 15th Amendment. They came here to Hattiesburg. They went into Rowan High School and looked at some of the teachers. One particular teacher was Mr. Roberson, and he was a National Science Scholar, but he had been refused numerous times by Circuit Clerk Thurman Lynn, who succeeded Luther Cox, who died in office, and continued his legacy of denying African Americans the right to vote. So for CBS to come into Hattiesburg and do a documentary showed that Hattiesburg was a major battleground for civil rights. They also followed a young lady who lived off of Down Street, and she was a student at Tougaloo College, and her name was Maddie Bivens. She later married Dave Dennis, who headed a corps during Freedom Summer, but Maddie allowed them to follow her as she walked to catch the bus, and what they did, they hid their camera in a shoebox, and they followed her downtown to the courthouse as she attempted to register to vote. So if you have not seen this documentary, you can see it. You can pull it up online. It's on YouTube. The first time we showed it here in Hattiesburg was in February of 2013, right after the tornado ripped through Hattiesburg. And the reason why many of the residents here had not seen this documentary was that in 1962, there was only one CBS affiliate, and it was in Meridian. Remember, we didn't have cable back then. And so for the most part, most people here in Hattiesburg had not seen this documentary. But we were able to honor Maddie Bivens that Sunday. And sometimes you have to move, and the spirits say move, because the next Sunday, she was gone to Houston, Texas. Her daughter came and got her because she was suffering from dementia. And she never made her way back to Hattiesburg. But I do understand that CBS did give Maddie Bivens a reel of the documentary back in 1962, but they told her not to show it because they felt like They didn't want any type of reprisatory action to occur to her. So there are so many wonderful stories coming out of Hattiesburg. The Civil Rights Movement was a movement of people. And Gracie Hathorn is one of the stories I like to tell. Gracie was a student at Rowan, and she caught a ride to Oxford, Ohio, to train with the Freedom Summer workers. She was assigned to work in Canton, Mississippi, but little did Gracie know that her face would become the rallying cry for Freedom Summer. She was when she was young, she had an afro, and behind her was the photo of One Man, One Vote. So Gracie was a student, and I think her story needs to be told like Jamela Stowe. And then you heard about Jamela yesterday, and she was in Freedom School in Palmer's Crossing. And the Palmer's Crossing Freedom School at Priest Creek tried to integrate the public library, but it was shut down by the mayor for inventory. But that didn't stop them. They walked down Main Street to S.H. Press, and Sandra Addick, who was their teacher, was with her Freedom Summer student, and they refused to serve her because they said that they were not going to serve a white person in the company of African American. She was later arrested, but she filed a lawsuit against S.H. Press out of New York because she was a New York resident. And she eventually won that lawsuit. And she assisted Jamela in going to college with some of that money that she received from that lawsuit. And then there's Doug Smith. And many of you knew Doug Smith. He grew up in the Down Street area, but he became the youth leader for Freedom Summer. And these are just some of the people that I have saw fit to honor over the years, people like Gracie, Doug Smith, Mr. J.C. Farrelly, Reverend J.C. Killingsworth, who came to Hattiesburg in 1967, right before we started the Merchant Bus Boycott. And he, along with Reverend Milton Bonds Jr., were very active in many of the protests and demonstrations that took place during that summer. I was supposed to talk about also the marker. Mount Zion, it was my home church, and certainly I was going to do a marker first there. Mount Zion served as a freedom school. It hosted most of the mass meetings during the height of the Civil Rights Movement because it was considered as a large church back then, and it could hold more people. Mount Zion also hosted Dr. Martin Luther King on a Tuesday night on March 19, 1968. And so there is a historical marker situated in front of Mount Zion Baptist Church that honor its pivotal role in the Civil Rights Movement. We also placed a historical marker in February 2005 at the homestead of Vernon Damer. During the 40th anniversary of the Mississippi Freedom Summer Project, while recovering from knee surgery, I brainstormed that what would be great would have a Civil Rights Institute for children that looked somewhat similar to the Freedom Summer School that we attended back in 1964. We opened this up. I got some other colleagues, including Stephanie Hose, who was at Mount Zion Freedom School, Deborah Denon, and we opened up a Freedom Institute for children. It was an 8-week program where they got an opportunity to come to the various churches that served as a freedom school. We went from one church, Morning Star, Mount Zion, Priest Creek, True Light, and St. John, and St. Paul. Those churches that served as freedom school back in 1964. So they had the opportunity to learn history. They watched documentaries like Eyes on the Prize. They also did dramatic interpretation. And we traveled outside of Hattiesburg for 2 weeks. We would go north and we visit Little Rock, Memphis. We went to Central High School along with, we do Bill Clinton Presidential Library in there. And also we went to the Capitol where you have the life-size statues of the Little Rock Nine. We also went to Memphis where we went to the Lorraine Hotel and they got a chance to visit, which I consider one of the best civil rights museum United States. And then we would travel 1 week eastward, where we would go to Birmingham, Montgomery, Selma, and Atlanta, to battlegrounds there, to the church where the little girls were killed that Sunday morning, right there in Birmingham, where the Civil Rights Museum is just a walk away. And so they had an opportunity to see history, and one of the most amazing things, the first class that we held in 2004, when we got to Selma, and they got on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they knew the significance of the crossing of the bridge, and they started singing, "I Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around." And that really touched my heart. I got a chance to see President Obama when he was there for the Jubilee anniversary a couple of years back. But the mere fact seeing those young people who were in junior and senior high school crossing that bridge on a Sunday morning singing, "I ain't gonna let nobody turn me around," while cars were passing by. It really was heartwarming. We did the civil rights marker for civil rights leader Vernon Damer in February 2005, and Congressman Benny Thompson came down for that unveiling. The last two markers are situated here on Mobile Street. One is honoring the 15 African American men who filed the first voting rights lawsuit, and the second one is honoring Reverend W.D. Ridgway, who went to Washington, D.C. to testify. And I'm just going to end with the fact that the newly built middle school, I had the opportunity to do the grassroots effort to name that school after my principal, Mr. N.R. Berger. And so what I do, and I love doing, is honoring these people who have made so much, whose shoulders we ride on. And so I will continue to do that, to honor them, to tell their story, so that future generation would know who passed this way.
Special guest in the audience who I want to acknowledge and see if he would be interested and willing to give a few remarks. This is Mr. Randall Williams, who was a contributor, a major contributor of this book about his experience in the class of 1968, the last fully segregated class of Rowan High School. Mr. Randall Williams, would you be willing to come up and support? I can come to you. Okay.
It will not last 10 minutes. I was coached very thoroughly to do it in 5, but I cut it to 6. Good morning. Good morning. The L.J. Rowan class of 1968, a thread through time. Whenever I speak of school or education, I never neglect to give honor and praise to our teachers who were the lifeblood to our mere existence. They sought to make a difference in our lives. Nor can I talk about the mighty class of 1968 without highlighting our accomplishments. Our book of memoirs is just the latest of the number of firsts introduced by our class. Since our 10th year reunion, we've celebrated every 5 years. We were the first class to reach out to another class to combine our resources and share reunion activities. Class of 1963's 40th and our class 35th. We were the first class to reproduce our school yearbook and the first to create a significant souvenir book for our 50th year reunion. So there is no wonder that in 2013, during our 45th year reunion, Doris Townsend Gaines shared an idea she had had for some time. Wouldn't it be exciting to publish a book of memoirs telling our own personal life stories? In 2018, during our 50th year reunion, Doris reintroduced her idea. The class bought into it, and that jump-started the solicitation campaign for interest from the class members. Doris admits that she had not a clue about how to write a book, let alone publish one. During the Euro celebration of 2017, a gentleman overheard Doris sharing her dream with a friend. Dr. Thomas O'Brien, specialist in the study of race and education in the American South, engaged Doris in conversation, and the birth of another class of 1968 first was realized. This realization yielded a 321-page, 47-participant book of memoirs, sharing our early experiences from everyday life to school experiences to the civil rights movement. Between 2018 and the latter part of 2020, the class rallied around our new and exciting adventure. Carolyn Hall Abrams' task was acquiring and maintaining a rapport with a reputable publishing company. Doris and the book committee met regularly with Dr. O'Brien and his assistant Olivia Moore, doctoral candidate student studying history at USM, who Doris gives the highest praise for their volunteer services and expertise. Doris and Carolyn took on the daunting task of editors, receiving all the entries and sifting through all the information to give the book its present form. Our effort in this major undertaking is twofold. Doris had a dream, shared it with her classmates, and like we have always done, came together for something good and made it happen. And secondly, we want this project to be an inspiration to other classes to do the same. There are two of our classmates who submitted entries into our book who passed away before their memoirs could be published, Ella Jackson and Tommy Hall. Giving honor to them, I shall read an excerpt from one of their entries. My first year at Eureka, the cafeteria was on the right side of the building you see today. The home economics class and the cafeteria were in the same building. The building faces New Orleans Street. The bathrooms were also in a building to themselves in the back of the cafeteria or lunchroom to some of us. A group of all black ladies with no education in preparing food, sanitation, or maintenance were able to feed 500 to 600 children a day. They were all just blessed by God with the wisdom to do the job. Business ladies, wives, church ladies, and mothers made the groups what they were.
Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. I learned so much, and I hope that you all did as well. I wanted to mention that books from the very book that we just heard about is for sale in the back with the person mentioned, Tom O'Brien, the education professor from USM, who helped in the production of this, is also selling the book in the back too. So if you're interested, please do purchase a copy. I also wanted to just mention that next up is our luncheon, our awards luncheon. This is for those who have already let us know that they're coming to the luncheon. So if you are sort of coming just here for this session, unfortunately we already have all of those meals accounted for, so I'm sorry about that. But we are incredibly grateful for all of you to spend time with us this morning here at this historic Eureka School in the very cafetorium that we just heard about from that former student. So again, thank you so much to coming to this panel. Thank you again to our panelists for their incredible presentations. And I hope that you have a wonderful day. Do make sure to check out the different options for the tours. One of the sites is the African American Military History Museum. But also feel free to go on that self-guided tour to see different sites in the Freedom Summer movement as well, or go on that downtown history tour. If you are interested in that tour, please do sign up at the registration table. Again, thank you. Wonderful. Okay, Ms. Norman just told me that they're going to also open the brand newly opened Smith Drugstore site as well. So please do check that out as well after the end of the awards luncheon. Thank you again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.